Hey pals, I'm here today to talk about a book I absolutely love, one of the best books I've read so far this year, absolutely amazing. And I want to do a standalone review of this one because I really think this would be enjoyed or loved even by the majority of readers who pick it up because it was just absolutely like perfection in my mind. And that is The Axeman's Carnival by Chidgey. I'm going to put this copy down because it's a library copy, although I will be buying my own copy of this book because, like I said, loved it, definitely a book I would like to reread. So this is a really interesting one because I read Pet by this author last year, really enjoyed it, and I've since seen lots of other people read that one and really enjoy it, so I think she's definitely a really adored author. And I was really surprised to hear that she had another book coming out this year because Pet only came out about a year ago. But when I heard about the premise of this one, I was a bit like, oh, like I wouldn't pick this one up if it wasn't for the fact that I really trust this writer. But I just want to assure you that even though the premise of this book sounds really out there and wacky, it doesn't read like that. I found it so endearing, I laughed loads, but it's also really heartbreaking and tender. So yeah, when I explain this premise, you need to kind of both look past it, but also kind of fully engage with it, because what makes this so wonderful is the narrative voice, but it's not annoying or like too wacky, which I think is what people may think this could be, and that's kind of what I was concerned about. So the premise of this book is that it's narrated by a magpie. This baby magpie opens their eyes and they are in a house and a woman is looking down at them, and this woman has saved them because they've just fallen out of their nest and hatched at the same time. So the first thing they see when they open their eyes to the world is this woman. She is called Marnie, she is a farmer's wife, and she decides to keep this baby magpie, get him back to full health and then release him into the wild. But in caring for him until he's old enough to be released, he bonds with her and she bonds with him. She names him Tama after Tamagotchis, and yeah, when he's old enough she lets him leave, which is very early in the book. And he leaves and goes to visit his magpie family, but he already feels separate from them. He already feels like he's not part of what they are, and he feels that he belongs with Marnie, so he goes back to her. The rest of the book is from Tama's perspective about this life he leads with Marnie, this kind of double life where he feels constantly like he's betraying part of himself. When he's with Marnie, he feels like he's betraying his magpie family, and when he's with his magpie family, he feels like he's betraying Marnie, and he never feels entirely comfortable. This story is about so much more than just the life of the magpie living with humans. There's several things going on in this narrative, and we'll start with the title, I guess. The Axeman's Carnival is an event that takes place once a year. Marnie's husband Rob competes every year in all of the challenges related to axes, and for the last 9 years he has won the kind of overall prize at the competition for being the best axeman. And so this is the 10th year. He is determined to win again, and he is concerned that he won't because there's this up-and-coming young man who is doing really well locally, and so he thinks this young man may beat him. And Rob really is the epitome of toxic masculinity. He is driven by pride and feeling a lot of shame and turning that shame outward into anger, particularly towards Marnie. When I say all that, I don't want Rob to sound like a character who is flat and without nuance. I think Rob's character is brilliantly explored, and even though I despised him, I really enjoyed reading about Rob. And so yeah, there's this premise about the book building up always to this Axeman's Carnival, and something that Chidgey did so well in Pet as well is this building sense of dread, and as you turn the page you're getting more and more concerned for the safety of some of the characters. In this book you're concerned in particular for Marnie's safety, but also for Tama's safety. Early on in the book there's a section that becomes a big part of the narrative, which is about domestic violence. So if that's something you aren't comfortable reading about, then I wouldn't recommend reading this book. And I'm going to read you that sort of section and show you how that's introduced, and also give you a sense of Tama's voice and his perspective. The first time I saw him hit her was not the first time he hit her. So I learned, so I gleaned. That was also how houses worked. One night in the dead of winter, he came in from the farm and drank and drank and drank. He sat with his head in his hands. He said, "We're so far in the red, we'll never get out. We can't keep making a loss. You chose the wrong man. You married a loser." Marnie fluttered around him. "No, no, no, and don't be silly, and it's just a bit of a downturn, and we're in it for the long haul." Then he drank some more, and then he staggered to the dining table and said, "Are those oven fries? How much did they cost? Can't you cut up a fucking potato?" His hand a rock against her jaw, his face a monster's face, plates upside down on the floorboards, tomato sauce spattering the table leg, the pepper grinder rolling all the way to the hall where I watched with my left eye and did nothing. Was it some kind of mating dance? Some kind of display? But I knew. She lay on the floor and made no sound. That's what I remember. He lay in his TV chair and turned on the TV, and the TV said, 30% off all pots and pans and 20% off everything store-wide, but only till Sunday. Rush in now and save. So yeah, a large part of this narrative is this building tension, both about the financial struggles they're having because of a drought on the sheep farm, and then also about Rob becoming more and more concerned that he won't win the Axeman's Carnival for the 10th year running, and a lot of that becomes anger directed towards Marnie, and also he has lots of frustrations about Tama, because a really big part of Tama's story is that he is incredibly intelligent, as a lot of birds are, and he learns to mimic voices and sounds very quickly, and he annoys Rob in doing that. He tends to try and learn during the night, and he sleeps in the house, and so when they're sleeping he's like repeating phrases to himself to perfect them so that he can show Marnie in the morning because he knows she likes it, and that keeps Rob awake. And he also mimics Rob a lot. Rob has 3 dogs he uses to corral the sheep, and he can mimic all the whistles that Rob makes to the dogs, so the dogs will follow Tama's command and not do what Rob wants him to do. He mimics a lot of the sort of negative phrases that Rob says, and he will say them at points where you can tell that he is smart enough that he's saying them to kind of stick the knife in. which is why this book is at once tense and heartbreaking and so desperately sad, because you're so sad for Marnie because she keeps staying with this man and she's hiding from everybody else what he's doing to her. It's also really funny because Tama is hilarious and he says really awkward things, and he adds this levity to really sad moments. And there's a moment where Marnie is watching a YouTube video about how to cover bruises, and the woman doing the video says, "Oh, you know, you don't want to look too ashy." And Marnie says to Tama, "How does it look?" And Tama repeats back in the YouTuber's voice, "You don't want to look too ashy," which is sad but also quite amusing, and that's kind of what this book is. Something else I loved about this book is that in hearing from Tama's perspective, you get these kind of repeated phrases that really, again, build this tension in the narrative. One is that quite early on in the book, he says about Rob, "I did not trust him and I was right not to." And that gets repeated with increasing frequency as the book gets more tense, which I thought worked really well. There's another phrase that Tama's father says, and so throughout the book he still connects with his family, he still goes to visit his sister and his father, and that sort of becomes its own narrative, which is really interestingly explored. But there's a phrase his father says to Tama from the moment Tama announces that he's going to live permanently with Marnie. He says, "We have forgotten you, understand? You are not even a memory, not even a ghost." And that's repeated throughout the book, and Tama starts to question if he is present when he's with the birds, if they even see him. There's moments where he will try and visit the family and they will talk like he's not there, and it becomes increasingly frustrating yet also funny, which again is what we get through the perspective with the domestic violence. There's this pairing always of dread and frustration, but also humour. Another part of this narrative which brings so much humour to the story is that early on in the book, Marnie posts a couple of photos and video clips of Tama online, and he becomes an internet sensation. So within the kind of how modern, how contemporary that storyline was, this book also felt really, not old, but kind of familiar and comforting, and rooted in these discussions we've had, you know, these themes, these broad themes that are ongoing across, you know, all of human history about, you know, gendered violence and pride and shame and heartbreak and fear. And I just loved everything about this book. There's so many other little narrative points I could touch on, but I'll just be here all day. I just loved it. And I think if I was to name an author who I felt had a bit of a similarity in terms of all the themes and just the warmth, humour and the warmth, they're the two words I would put together the most with this book, as well as the dread, which perhaps isn't within the books of this other author, is Carys Bray. So she's a British author who writes about families, and her books always have so much warmth and familiarity and humour, I think. And I think this is like Carys Bray, but with an element of dread built into it, which I love, because I love books that have this building sense of dread. I think this book builds the tension really, really well. I think sometimes a fear I have of books like this that are building this dread is at the end will be like a balloon just slowly deflating and it'll be a bit of a letdown. This isn't that at all. I thought the ending was brilliant. I thought she ended it at precisely the right moment, and yeah, left us with enough to think about, but also tied the story up enough that we had the resolutions we wanted to know about. So I love this book. I would love for anyone who's read it to comment down below. I will forever remember loads of the quotes that Tama makes. There were so many scenes that I just laughed out loud. For the people who've read it, and this isn't a spoiler, the first scene where the cameraman is sent to the house to film Tama, I just was in stitches. It was so funny. I was cracking up. So yeah, I loved this book, and I will definitely be going back and reading Catherine Chidgey's other books, because yeah, 2 for 2 that have just been brilliant. And yeah, I think she is absolutely fantastic. So let me know if you read it, and also let me know if you plan to read it, because yeah, I would love to see more people pick this one up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.